Hey guys, tonight we're heading into a story that's equal parts nostalgic and unsettling. Imagine this: towering aisles lined with brightly colored toys, the sound of laughter echoing off tile floors, and that distinct smell of plastic and popcorn that only existed in one place. Playworld. It wasn't just a toy store, it was a childhood rite of passage, the kind of place where kids sprinted ahead of their parents, eyes wide, hearts pounding, convinced they'd found paradise in aisle 7. But as you probably guessed by now, that paradise had a basement. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I'm always curious who's joining me on these midnight journeys. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing outside an old Playworld building. The sign is faded now, half the letters missing, and what used to glow in joyful primary colors has dulled to a pale rust. The automatic doors are stuck slightly ajar, creaking in the wind like they're too tired to pretend anymore. You step inside. The air is still. Dust clings to forgotten shelves. A deflated rubber ball rolls slowly across the floor like it's remembering better days. You walk past aisles labeled action figures, board games, and nursery joy. No children, no employees in colorful aprons, just quiet. And underneath that quiet, something deeper like a breath being held. Playworld was born in 1952 in a small warehouse in Connecticut when a retired Navy engineer decided that America needed a toy store as grand as its dreams. The Cold War was humming in the background. Televisions were becoming household staples, and consumerism was learning how to sprint. It was the perfect storm for a place like Playworld to grow, and grow it did. By 1975, there were over 300 locations across the U.S., and by 1985, the company went public with a bang. Investors called it the Disneyland of retail. Kids dragged their parents through fluorescent-lit jungles of Nerf guns and Hot Wheels. Adults wandered the aisles secretly wishing they were 8 again. Even in the early 2000s, when malls started dying off like rotary phones, Playworld hung on barely. You move past a broken demo station where a plastic dinosaur once roared on command. Now, it's silent, its mouth half open like it died mid-sentence. There's something heartbreaking about that. And somewhere in this place in its prime worked a guy named Ethan Cole. You first meet him in your mind's eye back in 2001, fresh out of college and taking a stockroom job, while figuring out what to do with a degree in marketing and a torn ACL that killed his football dreams. Ethan had this easy charm part coach, part golden retriever. He made everything feel doable. Loading boxes, diffusing tantrums, helping a lost kid find her mom. Ethan was the guy you wanted running the show, even when he wasn't. By 2010, he'd climbed the ranks, not because he knew corporate lingo or wrote killer emails, but because he showed up every day with two things: humility and coffee for the crew. People noticed. You touch the edge of the old manager's office door. It's still slightly ajar. Inside, there's a faint smell of stale paper and old ink cartridges. His chair, still pushed under the desk, squeaks when you move it. The memory of Ethan still clings to this space, like it's waiting for him to clock in just one more time. He wasn't just a manager, he was a dad. 2 kids, a wife named Valerie who ran a home bakery and occasionally brought cupcakes for the staff. You imagine birthday parties in the break room with balloons tied to office chairs and employees sneaking icing when no one's looking. Here's your first weird historical tidbit to chew on. In 1978, Playworld launched a failed campaign to introduce an in-store robot named Tommy Trolley. It short-circuited within a week and famously caught fire near the Barbie aisle. Still, that kind of over-the-top ambition defined the place. But by 2012, the digital age was barreling through retail like a wrecking ball in a Santa costume. Amazon wasn't just taking market share. It was reprogramming how people thought about shopping. Why drag your kids through a physical store when you could click your way to happiness? Playworld scrambled. They launched an app, added birthday party rooms, even tried to partner with YouTube toy influencers. None of it worked. And this is where our story narrows from macro to micro. Because while the company was faltering in boardrooms, Ethan was still arriving at 5 a.m. every day. unlocking the front doors with a key on a Spider-Man lanyard. Ready to face another weekend rush, you turn a corner and spot a tiny sticker on the floor. Staff pick. Ethan recommends Lego City Police Station. It's faded, peeling, but still there. Historians still argue whether retail nostalgia like Playworld was ever sustainable. Was it truly built on joy or just a clever manipulation of childhood sentiment? You're leaning toward the latter tonight, especially with what's about to unfold. But for now, the shelves stand still, and behind them, so does the truth. You follow the creaking tiles past the baby dolls and retro board games, back in time to when the fluorescent lights still worked and the air smelled like bubblegum and plastic packaging. It's Saturday in the mid-2000s, and Playworld is alive, buzzing with kids tugging on sleeves, parents checking price tags, and employees trying to locate a rogue Tickle Me Elmo someone swears they saw just 5 minutes ago. In this golden age of toy store wonder, the shelves are always stocked. The overhead music loops jingle pop covers of old TV themes, and Ethan Cole moves through it all like a conductor of chaos. Clipboard in hand, radio clipped to his hip, he's helping a grandmother find the last Beyblade arena while texting his wife about lasagna for dinner. You're right behind him, watching as he flashes a practiced grin and tells a sobbing 5-year-old, "Buddy, don't worry. We've got more fire trucks than the actual fire department." You almost believe it too. Playworld isn't just his job, it's his stadium. Remember, this guy had college football dreams, played tight end for the University of Minnesota, until a shredded ACL sidelined him forever. Not everyone makes peace with a dream deferred, but Ethan, he made a new one. He turned toys into teamwork, sales reports into scoreboards, and his crew into a squad. And honestly, it worked. He wasn't some uptight retail boss who measured success by shrink rates or shift punctuality. No, Ethan measured success in birthday high fives and cleanup games. If you clocked out early but helped a kid find the right Nerf darts, you were golden. And just like every good origin story, his rise from stockroom rookie to general manager wasn't flashy. It was quiet, steady. He stayed late when no one asked, volunteered for overnight inventory, trained new hires with patience that bordered on saintly. Everyone liked Ethan. Here's something weird you probably didn't know. The earliest toy stores in America, like FAO Schwartz, doubled as theaters. Staff performed puppet shows while parents browsed. Ethan would have thrived in that world. He had a showman's soul, minus the ego. But even back then, cracks were forming beneath the happy plastic. Playworld's corporate headquarters had shifted focus. More budget cuts, less training, quotas that made no sense. Ethan once joked that upper management thought the shelves stocked themselves and kids bought things with vibes. Still, he shielded his team from most of the stress. When corporate sent those chirpy emails about customer delight initiatives, Ethan would sigh, then find a way to make them work without driving everyone insane. One of the quirks of the Maple Grove location, it had the largest floor plan in the region, over 48,000 square feet of carpeted chaos. That meant more customers, more stock, and way more stress during the holidays. Ethan handled it like a quarterback mid-blitz, but not everyone liked the pressure. Enter Brian Maddox, regional security supervisor with a clipboard full of rules and a smile that never reached his eyes. You see him for the first time one chilly October afternoon, walking the perimeter with an air of authority and a weird obsession with checking the security tags on Barbie accessories. Something about him feels tight, too rehearsed, like someone who's been watching how normal people act and is trying really hard to pass. He and Ethan got along professionally, but barely. They disagreed on store security protocols, employee background checks, even where the break room microwave should go. Ethan, always collaborative. Brian, always quoting the manual. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. Studies have shown that people who overuse corporate lingo in casual settings are more likely to exhibit high self-monitoring behavior. Translation: they care way too much about appearances. And Brian, he lived for appearances. Yet Ethan didn't press, didn't report the petty theft rumors, didn't question why Brian sometimes stayed after hours without logging time. He gave people the benefit of the doubt, sometimes to a fault. By 2011, Playworld's glory was dimming. Walmart and Target were undercutting prices. Amazon was launching same-day shipping in test cities. Even little boutique toy shops were eating into their margins with curated, Instagram-friendly setups. Playworld, with its bright lights and old-school mascot commercials, was starting to feel like a dinosaur wearing roller skates. Historians still argue whether traditional retail could have survived if they'd adapted faster, or if nostalgia just isn't enough to keep the lights on. But Ethan, he kept showing up. There's a moment you remember vividly. Early 2012, Ethan hosts a summer sneak peek night for local families. He hand-builds cardboard castle displays, lets the staff dress in superhero capes, and brings his own kids to help with face painting. The night ends with a bubble machine and a dance party in aisle 9. Customers leave smiling. Staff feel proud. Ethan watches from the back, tired but glowing. And maybe that was the last truly good moment. Because by autumn, inventory discrepancies start piling up. High-demand items vanish off manifests. Ethan starts getting nervous. He writes notes, flags items, sends quiet emails. And when he asks Brian about the missing merchandise, he's told it's a glitch in the supply chain system. That phrase it echoes, doesn't it? It sounds polished, corporate, but hollow. You wonder what Ethan really thought when he heard it. Did he suspect? Did he plan to confront Brian more directly? Or was he still hoping it would all resolve without a scene? One last detail. Tucked behind the manager's desk was a notepad Ethan used for reminders. On the final page, scribbled in his fast, tidy handwriting, check camera logs. 4:20 a.m. Brian. You imagine him writing that, heart pounding, still hoping it wasn't what it looked like. But it was. You're standing in Maple Grove now, not in the store, not yet, just outside, under a soft Minnesota sky where the air smells faintly of cedar mulch and coffee. It's the kind of town that sells warm donuts at church fundraisers, where strangers hold doors for each other. And the most controversial topic at City Hall is whether the new bike path should go behind the library or loop around the lake. This isn't the kind of place where anything bad happens. That's what everyone says in interviews. Years later, you watch them on grainy YouTube clips, neighbors, coworkers, old school teachers all blinking into the camera with that look of startled grief. It just doesn't make sense. One woman says, not in Maple Grove, but you know better now. The town's got all the usual trappings of suburban charm, tree-lined boulevards, a seasonal farmer's market, and a community center that hosts Tuesday night yoga and Friday night bingo. If you drive around long enough, you'll pass Ethan's neighborhood, modest houses, 2-car garages, bikes on front lawns. The kind of place where barbecues are spontaneous and sprinklers are fair game. Valerie, his wife, still lives there. You picture her in the kitchen at sunrise, pouring cereal for 2 kids who will eventually learn the truth in pieces, first the gentle version, then the hard one. That dad died. That someone made that choice. Playworld sits just off the highway, exit Maple Grove's commercial pride. Built in the early 90s during the town's retail boom, it was considered a destination store. Parents from neighboring towns made the drive just to see the animatronic dragon near the entrance. Fun fact, that dragon's name was Ziggles, and it once malfunctioned so badly during a Christmas event that it sprayed confetti out of its nose for 5 straight minutes. You pull into the empty parking lot. It's late fall, November 2012. The air's sharp. Your breath fogs as you walk toward the glass doors. A help wanted sign still hangs, crooked. Inside, the lights flicker weakly to life on a motion sensor delay. It's early, too early for customers. You check your phone. 5:32 a.m. Ethan has already arrived. He parks in his usual spot, directly under the lamppost near the loading dock. Always early, always methodical. You see him through the grainy lens of the store's internal cameras, brisk steps, key in hand, hoodie zipped up against the cold. He disappears inside. You follow, quiet, down the back hallway, past the storage rooms and the soda machine that hasn't worked since July. He's carrying a clipboard, already noting the top-of-day checklist. Restock action figures, finalize weekend promos, fix the price gun in aisle 14. And though it isn't on the list review, those suspicious camera logs he mentioned the day before, the office is warm, familiar, Coffee brewing. A quiet hum from the security system. Ethan drops into his chair and pulls the CCTV monitor closer, taps a few buttons. Then, something shifts. At 4:20 a.m., a figure appears on the screen. It's a man face hidden behind a ski mask. Wearing a black jacket and gloves, he moves with confidence. No hesitation. He slips past the loading dock cameras with ease, heads straight for the back hallway, and within 90 seconds, disables the building's alarm system. Ethan rewinds, watches it again. The coffee is cooling. The sun is not yet up. He reaches for the phone, dials internal security, maybe even 911. We'll never know for sure. And then everything stops. You don't see it. You don't hear it. But it happens. Right here, in this room, at 5:45 a.m. The building alarm, not the security system, but the emergency fail-safe goes off. A shrill, horrible sound that echoes through every aisle. Past teddy bears and train sets. The first employee to arrive is a teenage floor assistant named Mia. She's shaken, says the front doors were still locked, says she tried calling Ethan on the walkie, no answer, says she thought maybe it was a drill, or maybe someone forgot to reset the motion sensor. She finds him, slumped in his chair, still wearing his hoodie, blood pooling underneath. The phone receiver, dangling. He never made it through the call. Police arrive within minutes. Crime scene tape goes up. Customers, unaware, are turned away at the door. A few try to peek inside, thinking it's a fire drill or maybe just an accident. But there are too many cops, too many serious faces, and one very quiet store. Here's a bit of real-world crime history for your restless mind. In the 1980s, toy stores were actually hotbeds for small-time theft and fraud rings. The high turnover of seasonal staff made it easier for internal crimes to go unnoticed. One California store reportedly lost $40,000 in merchandise to an inside ring of employees swapping barcodes. No one ever talks about this because, well, it ruins the magic. But the truth has sharp edges. Inside the Maple Grove playworld, those edges cut deep. There are no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no alarms triggered prior to the failsafe, which means someone knew the codes, knew the layout, knew how to slip past the cameras. Detectives begin the interviews. Staff, suppliers, even former employees. Most are shocked, heartbroken, scared. But one person, just one, seems oddly composed. Brian Maddox. When asked where he was at the time of the alarm, he says he was asleep, at home, alone. No one can confirm it. And when they ask him for a voluntary DNA sample, he pauses, says he'll talk to his lawyer, which is fine. That's his right. But your gut twitches, because people like Ethan, they had nothing to hide. And people like Brian, they often do. You step softly back into the office, Ethan's office. There's a coffee mug still sitting on the desk. The kind with a cheesy motivational phrase printed in bold, "Be the reason someone smiles today." It's chipped on the rim, probably from being dropped once and glued back together, just like so many things in this story. The crime scene report is clinical, emotionless. Entry wound, trajectory, blood loss estimate, but you're not reading it on paper, you're seeing it in your mind. The way the chair was turned slightly toward the door, the way the phone receiver was only halfway off its cradle, like he'd barely had time to lift it. The silence after the sound, it's strange what a toy store holds on to after a tragedy. The shelves don't fall over, the toys don't melt or scream or bleed. They just sit there, waiting, as if the whole place refuses to accept what's happened within its walls. You linger on that image. The manager's chair, still slightly warm from a life now gone. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzing as if trying to say something, but not quite getting it out. Meanwhile, detectives begin piecing together the timeline. Ethan entered the building at 5:17 a.m. At 5:45, the fail-safe alarm triggered. That gives the killer roughly 28 minutes, long enough to enter, confront, silence, and exit. There are no signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, just a man at his desk, and a quiet death. The local PD immediately suspects an inside job. No forced entry, no alarms tripped. Surveillance footage is frustratingly limited. That's by design. You already know who designed it. Brian Maddox, regional security supervisor, had full access to the system. He'd even installed the latest camera update himself just 2 weeks prior. The masked figure on the surviving tape isn't just familiar with the building, they know which cameras to avoid. They even kill the main circuit that handles the front-facing monitors, bypassing the secondary backup that should have recorded everything. But one thing slips through: the intruder's height and gait. Roughly 6'2", slight limp on the left leg, broad shoulders, and a beanie hat, one that gets left behind in the rush out. It's found behind a shelf in the back hall. Probably fell off during the exit. It's plain black, no logos. Inside the rim, a few strands of hair, some sweat, some skin cells. Bagged, tagged, sent to the lab. The police don't share this right away. Instead, they begin quietly observing everyone in Ethan's circle, reviewing schedules, interviewing staff, and yes, circling in closer on Brian Maddox, the man with the clipboard and the ever-neutral expression. Brian presents himself like he always does by the book. He expresses sorrow, outrage, says Ethan was a dedicated colleague, says he's fully committed to assisting the investigation. He even sends flowers to the Cole family, white roses, but he declines the DNA swab, claims his lawyer advised against it on principle. Now that's a choice. Here's a little historical parallel to make your skin crawl. In 1994, a janitor at a shopping mall in Ohio was found guilty of a double homicide. Like Brian, he worked security. Like Brian, he initially offered full cooperation until DNA was mentioned. Suddenly, he lawyered up. It took 17 months and a discarded coffee cup to get the match that closed the case. Back in Maple Grove, detectives are patient. They know DNA takes time, but they also know pressure works. So they let the heat build quietly, systematically. They interview Valerie. She's wrecked but composed. Says Ethan had mentioned odd activity on the store's inventory logs, missing units, a hunch about someone skimming high-value toys. She didn't push for details. He didn't want her worrying. That was Ethan, always protecting people. Investigators start digging into internal theft records. Turns out, over the past 2 years, the Maple Grove Playworld reported an unusually high shrink rate retail speak for "we're losing stuff and we don't know why." Toys disappearing during transfers. Entire pallets of Lego sets miscounted or misrouted. Value-wise, it wasn't just pocket change. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. And here's where it gets worse. Every one of those missing transfers passed through the same chain of approval, same regional zone, same digital sign-off. Brian Maddox. Still, there's no hard evidence, just patterns. But then the DNA results come back. You don't need the paperwork to know what they say. The cells in the hat match Brian. Police pay him a visit. He's in the middle of a conference call when they arrive. He doesn't run, doesn't shout, just calmly ends the call and says, "Am I being arrested?" "No, not yet." They say, but they ask again, "Will you give a formal statement now that the lab has results?" This time, he doesn't answer, just looks out the window, where the Playworld logo still beams from the top of the building like a lie no one's had the decency to take down yet. Later that day, his lawyer releases a statement saying Brian maintains his innocence and that the hat must have been planted. Of course it was. You sit with that phrase a moment. Planted. It always sounds dramatic until you realize how boring real crime usually is. No shadowy figures, no high-tech heists, just debt, desperation, and denial. Brian was in financial trouble. That much becomes clear. Records show massive credit card debt, missed mortgage payments, failed real estate ventures. At one point, he'd taken out a high-interest loan under his brother's name. That case never went to trial, but it left a scar. Still, the motive doesn't excuse the method. You imagine the moment at the confrontation. Ethan realizing the truths, calling Brian in, not yelling, not accusing, just asking why. And Brian cornered, embarrassed, enraged, seeing no way out. Historians still argue whether some crimes are crimes of passion or crimes of calculation. But what if it's both? What if the plan starts rational and ends with a pulse so loud you can't hear yourself think? In the end, it took 2 minutes, one decision, and a life ended in silence. The Playworld building is still closed when you return to it in your mind, just as the sun is starting to rise. The parking lot is roped off with orange cones and temporary fencing. the kind you usually see during sidewalk repairs or small-town marathons. But there's no parade today, no crowds, just silence and the occasional flash of red and blue bouncing off the glass. Inside, the store is frozen mid-weekend prep. The aisles are neat, shelves freshly faced. One of the shopping carts still has a pair of unopened action figures tucked inside a forgotten customer reservation. The store isn't a crime scene yet. It's a contradiction. Everything in its place, and something terrible missing. The detectives step into Ethan's office first, gloves on, radios crackling softly. They stand still for a moment, as if expecting to feel something, a lingering energy, some imprint left behind. But there's only a chair, a desk, a receiver dangling by its cord. The forensic team photographs everything, measures blood spatter, dusts for prints. They bag the coffee mug, swab the phone. They move with that methodical calm you've seen 100 times in true crime documentaries. But you're not watching this through a screen. You're standing in it. And here's the strange part. No one cries right away. That comes later. Right now, the employees gathering outside just want answers. Mia, the floor assistant who found Ethan, sits on the curb, knees tucked to her chest, a crumpled tissue in her fist. Her mom has shown up and wraps a coat around her shoulders, but Mia barely responds. Another employee, Carlos, stares at the building like he's trying to will it back into normalcy. He was just here yesterday. He keeps saying, he was just here. That's the thing about sudden death, it doesn't feel real at first. It's not a car crash or an illness you can brace for. It's not even loud. It's instant. 1 second, a person is finishing their checklist. The next, they're a headline. By noon, the media catches wind. The local news station sends a van. A reporter in a too bright blazer stands just out of frame, practicing her serious but comforting voice. Behind her, the giant red and yellow Playworld logo looms like a clown forced to attend a funeral. And oh, how quickly a place meant for joy can turn eerie. You step back from the crowd and walk around the side of the building. There, just beyond the security gate, is the back hallway, the loading zone, the place the intruder entered, a maintenance door, unalarmed but coded, meant only for authorized staff. Guess who had the code? Brian Maddox doesn't show up that day. His absence is noted but not questioned. Not yet. After all, he's not a suspect, at least not officially. The company releases a statement calling the incident a terrible tragedy and pledging full cooperation with law enforcement. Corporate speak at its most robotic. And meanwhile, detectives dig deeper. They learn that Ethan had submitted an internal report just 3 days prior, outlining suspected inventory fraud. It wasn't a formal accusation, more like a polite nudge. Some discrepancies. He'd written, would like to review with regional supervisor. He'd even suggested a meeting, set for Monday. He never made it. Here's something unusual from police procedure history. According to a 2011 DOJ study, over 70% of workplace homicides involve no witnesses and occur during early or late shifts. The quiet hours, the empty hours, the perfect hours for someone who doesn't want to be seen. By that evening, Playworld Corporate sends grief counselors to the Maple Grove location. A few employees take up the offer. Most just sit quietly in the break room, still waiting for Ethan to walk through the door and tell them everything's fine. But you already know it's not. Valerie is notified by 2 plainclothes officers. They knock gently, like they're afraid the news might echo through the walls. She doesn't scream. She doesn't collapse. She simply whispers, "No," and stands still long enough that one officer places a hand on her arm just to make sure she hasn't stopped breathing. Her children are at school when it happens. She chooses to tell them herself. You don't follow that conversation. You stay outside the house, on the front porch, where a delivery box sits unopened. It contains a toy Ethan had ordered for their son. A limited edition model train he'd planned to wrap that weekend. You can almost hear his voice. He's gonna freak out when he sees this. Inside the store, detectives finish for the night. They'll return tomorrow. For now, the scene is sealed. Lights off. Tape up. Nothing moves, except your thoughts. You walk back inside, mentally, past the cashier station, past the arcade corner, into aisle 12, the birthday section. A banner hangs above the shelves. Make every day magical. It feels cruel now. A birthday aisle in a murder scene. You look around and realize how many stories lived in this building. First toys, first paychecks, first crushes between seasonal hires, parents reconnecting with their kids over plastic lightsabers, grandparents marveling at how toys used to be simpler. Playworld wasn't just a store, it was a vessel for memories, a weird little capsule of innocence. And now, it's contaminated. You wonder how long it will sit like this, how long it takes for a store to stop being a store after a murder. Will it reopen, be bulldozed, turn into a spirit? Halloween. Historians still argue whether certain spaces retain the emotions tied to them. There's even a fringe theory in environmental psychology suggesting that buildings can hold grief the way fabric holds scent. That walking into a room where someone died can trigger a physical reaction in the body even if you don't know why. You feel that now. And it's not just grief, it's betrayal. Because the man who did this wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a masked intruder from some distant nightmare. He was someone Ethan knew, someone he trusted, at least a little. That's the part that really haunts you, not the silence, not the blood, but the fact that Ethan probably didn't even raise his voice. You're in the break room now. It smells like reheated lasagna and old lemon cleaner. The ghosts of a dozen staff lunches. The walls are painted that corporate beige that somehow makes everything feel more temporary. And the corkboard still holds flyers for last month's employee costume contest and a printout titled "How to Spot Shoplifters Politely." This is where the investigators begin to realize something isn't right. Not just with the crime itself, but with the puzzle pieces that remain. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, and an alarm system that was professionally bypassed within 90 seconds. Not disabled accidentally, not glitched. Bypassed with precision. They pull the security logs, not the camera footage. You already know most of that was wiped, but the digital system records. Who logged in? What passwords were used? Which doors opened when? You'd be surprised how much data buildings spit out when no one's paying attention. Or maybe you wouldn't. You're not exactly sleeping easily at this point. At 4:18, a login is made to the central security terminal from an external device. That device, it turns out, had been registered during a routine update 2 months earlier. Registered by Brian Maddox. Now, this alone doesn't prove anything. A regional security supervisor would need that kind of access. But the timing, suspicious. The fact that the camera angles were altered just a few minutes later, more so, and remember the masked figure seen on the few remaining angles. He knew exactly which paths to take, which halls to avoid, which cameras had blind spots, and that security panel located near the back hall, mounted chest high with a numeric keypad. It logged one failed code attempt, then a success. You wonder if Ethan ever heard it, if that faint beep 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 click drifted under his office door like a whisper that arrived too late. Meanwhile, Brian Maddox keeps playing the role, the careful, corporate loyalist. He sends an email to Playworld leadership expressing shock and sorrow. He offers to help coordinate regional safety updates. He even attends the candlelight vigil held outside the store 3 days after Ethan's death. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His presence is the performance. But here's what he doesn't know yet. One of the IT technicians, let's call her Jenny, noticed something odd. The update Brian had pushed 2 weeks earlier. It didn't just install new firmware, it also suppressed one critical logging function. Specifically, it disabled the backup metadata archiving for motion-triggered events. In plain English, it made sure that when he erased the footage, there wouldn't be a trace of what he erased. That's not just sneaky, that's premeditated. Detectives are circling now. They revisit the employees, quietly, separately. They ask about Brian's behavior. Did he ever hang around after hours? Did he act nervous? Was he ever alone in the office? Carlos, the assistant manager, mentions something odd. A few weeks before the incident, he found Brian in the supply closet not doing anything, just standing there, like he was waiting for something or someone. Carlos brushed it off at the time. But now it feels like foreshadowing. And there's another thing. The store's inventory audit report from October, an internal document that Ethan had flagged was last accessed remotely on November 8th, 2 days before the murder. Guess who accessed it? Right? Still, without a confession. They need more. That's when the lab calls. The hat found behind the shelf contains trace DNA. yes, but also something else. Minute fibers consistent with a specific brand of thermal undershirt, one sold exclusively by a sportswear brand. Ethan knew Brian liked. Not quite a smoking gun, but enough to narrow the possibility that someone else planted the hat. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. In the 1970s, forensic investigators began experimenting with vacuum filters to collect evidence from clothing, essentially hoovering for crime. It worked better than expected. One case was cracked by a single cat hair found embedded in a wool scarf. Brian's version of the story, of course, doesn't change. He claims he hasn't been inside that store in weeks. He even tries to pivot, suggesting Ethan may have had enemies, that perhaps someone was framing him out of jealousy. You can practically hear the last shovel of dirt hitting his own credibility. But despite all this, the data, the login records, the security logs, it's the DNA that finally breaks the dam. His lawyer, perhaps sensing what's coming, schedules a meeting with the district attorney. No cameras, no microphones, just a quiet exchange behind closed doors. The plea deal is drafted in 3 days. Second-degree manslaughter, not murder. It's an ugly compromise, but one the prosecution takes, knowing that dragging it through trial risks tainting Ethan's legacy with endless scrutiny and courtroom performance. Valerie agrees. She wants it over. She wants her children to have something that at least resembles closure. Historians still argue whether plea deals in violent crimes are mercy or missed justice. Some say they prevent re-traumatization. Others call them modern-day loopholes. The debate, like grief, has no tidy ending. Brian Maddox is sentenced to 25 years in prison. He does not speak at sentencing. You wonder what he tells himself in the quiet hours, whether he believes he had to do it, whether he thinks Ethan left him no choice, or whether, like a man staring at himself too long in a bathroom mirror, he finally cracked under the weight of who he pretended to be. Back at the store, the tape comes down, but the magic doesn't return. The company issues a formal statement, promises new safety protocols, but internally, Playworld's grip is slipping. The Maple Grove location never reopens. It becomes a storage facility for excess merchandise, then a clearance warehouse, and finally, after a long silence, a real estate listing. The listing photo still shows the customer service desk. You can just barely see Ethan's nameplate on the wall. You're in the courtroom now, not as a juror, not as a lawyer, just there, just watching. The walls are that cold cream color every courthouse seems to choose, as if beige were somehow synonymous with justice. The air smells like floor polish and pencil shavings. There's a humming noise, maybe from the fluorescence overhead or the heating system below, but it's constant, steady, the same kind of low buzz you'd hear in a waiting room before a bad diagnosis. Brian Maddox is seated at the defense table. He wears a dark gray suit that doesn't quite fit, probably borrowed or rented, and he doesn't look up, not once. He keeps his eyes forward, somewhere between the defense brief and nothingness. He's thinner than you remember, not dramatically, just slightly hollowed out, like a man who spent months rehearsing neutrality and forgetting what it's like to blink without permission. The plea deal has already been accepted. Today is just sentencing, one final moment to read it into the record, to acknowledge at least legally that something irreversible has happened. Valerie is there. She doesn't speak. She sits in the third row with her sister on one side and her father on the other, both flanking her like human shields. Her hands are clasped in her lap, knuckles white, as if she's holding something fragile and invisible. The judge reads the terms. 25 years, no parole for the first 12, mandatory psychological evaluation, lifetime ban from any security-related employment. The language is sterile, bureaucratic, devoid of the emotional weight the room so clearly carries. And Brian, he signs the papers, still silent. It's strange watching someone sentenced for murder, well, manslaughter with such little drama, no outbursts, no tears, no final confessions, just a man folding himself inward and disappearing by degrees. The courtroom empties slowly. People linger, unsure if they should say something or just leave. A few reporters jot notes. One leans over to her colleague and mutters, "You think he'll last in prison?" You don't answer out loud, but in your head, you think he'll last, but he won't sleep. Later, in the hallway, Valerie steps outside. It's cold. overcast. The kind of Minnesota day that feels like the sky is thinking too hard. She doesn't cry. She just stands by the stone pillar of the courthouse entrance and breathes. And here's the part no one writes into the articles. Her children are at home, with a sitter, watching cartoons. Probably, maybe still too young to understand what courtrooms do. Maybe they think today is just another grown-up errand. But one day, they'll know. They'll Google their father's name. They'll find the news clips. They'll learn that he didn't die in an accident, or because someone made a mistake. They'll learn that it was someone Ethan worked with, trusted, held the door for someone who stood 2 feet away in a Playworld aisle and said, "Hey, good shift today." Man, back in the police station, the evidence board still hangs in the back room. Photos, timelines, strings connecting moments that now seem unbearably quiet. The clipboard Ethan used is sealed in a plastic bag. So is the hat. So is the memory card that should have held a full night of camera footage, but doesn't. Detectives move on to other cases, because they have to. Because there are always more, but you don't. Not yet. You find yourself drifting back to the scene. The toy store. The forgotten place. It's early 2013 now, and the Maple Grove location has been stripped for parts. Shelves gone, fixtures boxed. A few sad, mismatched action figures sit in a bin marked liquidation. The walls echo. You can hear your footsteps again. A teenager in a rented truck loads up the last of the signage. The letters from the front display, PLAYWORLD, now rest in the bed of a pickup, headed for scrap or storage. And yet, somehow, the store still feels like it remembers you. Like if you listen long enough, you can still hear the click of Ethan's key in the morning lock. Still smell the Sharpie ink from employee name tags. Still hear a faint whisper of Ziggles, the animatronic dragon snorting out confetti from 5 Christmases ago. Here's a detail history books won't include, but you will. For several months after the store closed, no one ever found out who left fresh flowers at the front door every Friday. Always sunflowers, always wrapped in blue ribbon. You imagine Valerie, or maybe one of the employees, maybe even a stranger who read about Ethan and couldn't stop thinking about him. Someone who understood that grief doesn't vanish with a guilty verdict. Grief lingers, and so does guilt. Historians still argue whether places like Playworld can ever return once they've been stained by tragedy. Not just physically, but spiritually. Some say it's a matter of time. Others say innocence, once fractured, can't be remade, only remembered. Maybe that's why toy stores started disappearing altogether. Not because Amazon was faster, not because malls collapsed, but because we stopped trusting the spaces we once thought were safe. Because someone taught us that even the happiest places have shadows. And because even behind shelves filled with teddy bears and train whistles, people still bleed. You find yourself outside the prison now. It's not a castle with towers or some bleak movie version carved out of concrete despair. It's just a building. Steel fences, parking lot, rows of narrow windows with narrow lives behind them. There's no drama here, just bureaucracy and locked doors. Inside, Brian Maddox now lives on a routine designed to erase identity. Wake up, eat, mop, lights out, repeat. He has a number, a bunk, a job in the laundry room. He folds sheets beside a man who once robbed a gas station with a BB gun, and a guy who insists he's innocent of everything, including parking tickets. And Brian. He doesn't talk much, keeps to himself, reads a lot. Something about that fits, doesn't it? You can imagine him with his head buried in a tattered paperback, trying to pretend he's somewhere else. He's eligible for parole in 2037. He'll be 60. But here's the thing. This part of the story isn't really about Brian anymore. It's about what he left behind. Back in Maple Grove, the building that once housed Playworld sits empty. A for lease sign has replaced the smiling mascot on the front door. Someone spray-painted "No Joy Here" across the back wall. A few weeks later, it was painted over, but you can still see the outline if you know where to look. You walk through the husk of what was. The floor is sticky with dust and half-peeled stickers. Someone has taken down the old directional signs. No more Superhero Central or Princess Palace. The ceiling lights flicker occasionally, triggered by motion sensors that now mostly catch moths. In the far corner, near where the birthday party station used to be, there's a stray balloon caught in the rafters. Blue, half deflated, still floating. You stare at it longer than you mean to. Meanwhile, Valerie and the kids have moved, not far, just across town. New school, new neighbors, new routines. But you know as well as she does you don't outrun this kind of thing. You just get better at walking with it. Her oldest son, Jake, is now in middle school. He's started asking more questions, not just about what happened, but why. And Valerie does her best to answer, with honesty, with gentleness, with long pauses in between. She tells him his dad was brave, that he tried to do the right thing, that sometimes doing the right thing costs more than it should. You wonder if Jake understands. You wonder if anyone ever really does. Once a year, they still visit the park. Ethan's favorite one. The one near the lake with the wooden climbing structure and the weirdly aggressive squirrels. They bring balloons, write messages, things like, "We miss you and happy birthday and wish you were here." Then they let them go. You watch them float up, drifting into the pale blue, and for a second, just a second, you imagine Ethan catching them, smiling, folding them into his back pocket like a receipt he doesn't want to lose. It's a small ritual, but it matters because memory needs something to hold on to. Here's a quirky little side note for the sentimental-minded. Some grief counselors now encourage memory anchoring. That's where families assign certain songs, smells, or places to their lost loved ones, deliberately, so they can return to them when needed. A smell of cinnamon rolls, a favorite bench, a blue balloon. Valerie, whether she knows it or not, has mastered this art. Back in town, the local library has added a children's reading corner dedicated to Ethan. It's not fancy, just a few plush chairs and a plaque, but it's always full. Kids curl up with books. Parents take pictures. No one reads the plaque out loud, but you catch a glimpse when the crowd thins. It says, "In memory of Ethan Cole, who believed joy should be shared, not stolen." And maybe that's the cleanest summation you'll get. Playworld, as a company, officially dissolved in 2016. After decades of trying to compete, it finally filed for bankruptcy. Analysts blamed it on changing markets, on tech-savvy competitors, on the slow death of brick-and-mortar retail. But you and I, we know better. We know it wasn't just e-commerce and failed quarterly goals. It was rot, hidden, growing. Because when a place that's meant to protect wonder becomes a cover for something darker, something greedy, cruel, calculated, there's no rebuilding from that. No ad campaign strong enough to repaint blood off a birthday aisle. Historians still argue whether nostalgia is healing or harmful, whether remembering the good distracts us from the bad, or whether it's what keeps us human. In Playworld's case, maybe it was both. The shelves were always lined with joy, but sometimes, behind the joy, someone was watching, waiting, planning, and someone else like Ethan was trying to stop it. You take one last look around the empty space. In your mind, it's still full. Aisles brimming with color, music in the air, laughter bouncing between Nerf blasters and glitter slime kits. But the light in Ethan's office is off. It's time to go. You're in Brian Maddox's mind now, or at least what's left of it. It's a Tuesday afternoon in his 7th year inside. He's sweeping a hallway in the East Wing, listening to the quiet shuffle of other inmates moving through their assigned rotations. He doesn't talk anymore, not because he's been threatened, or because of some dramatic vow of silence. He just ran out of words. Most of his time is spent cataloging excuses in his own head. If you listened closely, you'd hear them echoing. "I didn't mean to. He left me no choice. I was desperate. No one would have understood." He never thinks, "I was wrong." That thought doesn't visit often. It knocks sometimes. Maybe late at night when the lights are dim and the noises fade. But mostly, Brian locks that door tight. He reads, though that part's real. He burns through books like they're firewood in a Minnesota winter. Crime thrillers. Oddly enough, spy novels, a few biographies, anything where people make mistakes and still come out clean in the end. He never reads the news. Back in the outside world, the Playworld building is being gutted. A local developer has bought the property. There are whispers it'll become a fitness center, maybe a discount furniture outlet, something unmagical, something that won't make people cry when they drive by. But as workers begin demolition, they find something strange behind the old security office. A rusted filing cabinet, long sealed shut, wedged between drywall and forgotten conduit. Inside, nothing criminal, just a stack of notes, store evaluations, safety memos, Ethan's handwriting on most of them. One page catches your eye. A checklist titled Fix Before Holiday Rush. It includes things like get new batteries for dancing snowman, talk to Carlos about Ray's, bring cupcakes for Mia's birthday, replace door alarm in Hall 3, talk to Brian about inventory reports. You stare at that last one longer than you mean to, because it's not accusatory. It's not a threat. It's not even flagged with a question mark. It's a conversation Ethan intended to have, not with anger, not with rage, just clarity, just doing his job, just being who he was. And that's the part that breaks your heart all over again. Ethan didn't go looking for confrontation. He didn't plot to expose Brian or report him to corporate with a flourish. He just wanted to talk, to understand, to get to the root of the problem and fix it before the rush. That was Ethan's way, kindness first, always. And Brian, he took that kindness for weakness. There's a quiet debate among psychologists about whether certain types of people weaponize empathy. That is, they interpret compassion not as strength, but as a vulnerability to exploit. Like a hand extended only makes it easier to pull someone down. You wonder if Brian thought about that in the moments before he entered the store. Whether he knew Ethan wouldn't scream, wouldn't fight, would probably just look at him with that same patient confusion and say, "Why are you doing this?" You imagine that final look, and it makes your stomach twist. Meanwhile, Ethan's children are growing up. Jake has taken up soccer. His sister, Lily, is into art lately, obsessed with sketching birds she sees from her bedroom window. Valerie's doing okay, not great, but okay. She works part-time at a local bakery now, the same one that catered Ethan's last employee appreciation day. She's learned to live with the holes, one in her bed, one in her calendar every November, and one in her heart that only ever throbs when the wind shifts just right, and the smell of old plastic and pine cleaner catches her off guard. Here's a fringe fact you probably didn't know. Some grief therapists use scent therapy for memory retrieval. One woman claimed that the smell of Play-Doh could transport her back to age 5 with startling clarity. It's funny what sticks, what time forgets, what the body remembers. Valerie keeps Ethan's hoodie, the one he wore that morning. It's been washed, but she swears it still smells like him coffee and printer toner and whatever weird aftershave he got too attached to in his 20s. She lets the kids wear it sometimes when they're sick. She says it makes them heal faster. At the library, the little reading corner continues to bloom. Donations roll in more books, more beanbag chairs. Someone even made a wooden plaque with Ethan's favorite quote, "Do the small things right. The big things will follow." No one remembers when he first said it, but everyone remembers that he meant it. Back in prison, Brian watches the snow fall through a narrow window. There's no sound to it, just the hush of white on concrete. He wonders, briefly, what the store looks like now, if anyone kept the dragon, if the carpet still has that weird sticky spot in aisle 7. He thinks of Ethan once, maybe twice a year, but he never says his name. Never writes it in his letters, never admits that somewhere, deep down, he misses having someone in his life who always assumed the best in him until the moment that assumption shattered. And even then, Ethan didn't flinch. He tried to fix it, tried to save someone who didn't deserve saving. And maybe that's the hardest truth of all, that even in the end, even when Brian entered that hallway with every intent to end something, Ethan still stood there, not with anger, but with concern. That he died not afraid, but confused, like he couldn't believe anyone would do this. Not him, not here, not in a place meant for joy. It's spring now. Maple Grove is thawing out. You can hear it in the soft crunch of boots on melting snow, in the sudden chorus of robins that return too early and regret it by nightfall. The lake has started to breathe again just a little. The ice pulls back like a curtain, lifting slowly on a stage that hasn't been used in months. You walk through town and notice the signs of normal life. Kids on scooters, someone mowing their lawn too early out of sheer optimism, coffee shops switching to pastel menus. And amid it all, Ethan's name still floats through conversation like a polite ghost. People don't always say it out loud anymore, but they remember. At the town courthouse, the clerk still has a sticky note on her drawer labeled "Coal Feet State." She hasn't removed it. Can't say why. Maybe it's habit. Maybe it's respect. In the community center, one of the youth leagues names their spring soccer tournament the Ethan Cole Invitational. Jake plays in it. He wears his dad's college number 88. The first time Valerie sees it printed on the back of his jersey, she almost cries. Almost. But she holds it in, because grief has its own choreography now. And like clockwork, spring brings an uncomfortable anniversary not of Ethan's death, but of Brian Maddox's sentencing. The news outlets do a brief recap. Nothing dramatic, just a scroll of text under the weather report. Playworld killer marks. 7 years behind bars. Some people skip right over it. Others read it twice and shudder. But for Valerie, there's no escaping it. Not because of the article, because of the date. April 12th, the day the man who broke her life received a number in place of a future. The town still debates the case sometimes, over coffee, on porches, in hushed tones at book club meetings, not about guilt or innocence. Those facts are settled. No, they argue over why. Was it the debt, the pressure, the loneliness? Was it a spontaneous act of rage or a long-buried crack that finally split open? Historians still argue whether motive really matters when the outcome is irreversible. And yet, we keep asking. In the courthouse archive room, a young intern finds the trial transcripts. They're organized, clipped, bound in a neat blue folder. She reads a few pages, notes. How calm Brian sounded. How clinical the prosecution had to be. How the words intent to cause harm carry so much weight when said under oath. The intern puts the folder back, goes home, tells no one. Meanwhile, the Playworld brand attempts one last flicker. Some marketing firm buys the name in 2015, announces plans to relaunch it as a digital-first toy experience. The press release is full of buzzwords: immersive, nostalgic, reimagined. There's even talk of a streaming series based on the original Playworld mascots. Yes, Ziggles the dragon makes an appearance. It fizzles. Hard. Turns out, you can't rebuild magic from paperwork, especially when one of your most Googled search results is Playworld manager killed by regional supervisor. SEO doesn't forget, and neither do small towns. You find yourself driving past the old location again. The sign is gone now. The building has been painted a sterile beige. It's a seasonal pop-up furniture outlet, now rows of clearance recliners and overstocked patio umbrellas. You walk through it just to see, and somewhere between a discounted sectional and an outdoor fire pit, you stop. This used to be aisle 9. You know it by heart. It was where the birthday kits were displayed, where Ethan used to let the staff set up early demos. You remember the noise, the plastic rustle, the laughter. Now it's silent. Not cold, not haunted, just blank. Back in prison, Brian receives a letter. He doesn't open it right away. He has a habit now, waits 2 days. Lets the envelope sit on the edge of his bunk like it might answer itself. He recognizes the return address. It's not from Valerie, not from the kids. It's from Carlos, the former assistant manager. The letter is short. It says, "I don't forgive you, but I needed to tell you that Ethan wasn't afraid of you. Not even in the end. He wasn't scared, just disappointed." Brian doesn't reply, but he keeps the letter, tucks it between pages of an old spy novel, reads it when he thinks no one's watching, and maybe, just maybe, that's the first honest thing he's felt in years. Here's a strange historical fact to carry into your sleep. In early 18th century England, toy stores often doubled as rumor hubs. Parents went there not just to shop, but to swap stories, share gossip, and gently calibrate their sense of community. The toys were only half the point. That's what Playworld was. A compass, a clubhouse, a tiny kingdom of routine. And when Ethan was killed, that compass spun off its axis. A place built for joy became a crime scene, not with sirens and screams, but with the quiet theft of trust. You take one last look around the furniture outlet, smile at the irony. A place once built for kids is now selling ottomans no child would care about. But in your mind, there's still music playing. And Ethan, somewhere behind the shelves, checking his clipboard, still trying to make things right. You're standing in a park now, Ethan's favorite. It's not famous, not sprawling, just a tucked away little patch of grass and trees beside the lake. If you didn't know it was there, you'd drive right past. The kind of place made for early morning jogs and kids learning to ride bikes with 2 big helmets and 2 small hands. There's a worn wooden bench by the water with a small plaque that reads simply, "In loving memory of Ethan Cole, kindness was his superpower." No birth date, no death date, no titles, just truth. This is where Valerie and the kids come every year. Sometimes with cupcakes, sometimes with silence. On Ethan's birthday, they write messages on balloons, Jake and Lily with bright markers, Valerie with small, looping letters, and let them go one by one into the wind. You watch the balloons rise. The strings trail behind them like paper comets, climbing slowly into a sky that never writes back. Jake's says, "You'd love my team this year." Lily's says, "I drew you as a superhero again." Valerie's simply says, "I'm still here." And then they sit for a while. They eat peanut butter sandwiches. They skip rocks. They don't talk about what happened in the store, not anymore. Not every time, because grief has settled in like an old cat, always present, rarely loud, always curling around their ankles when the air turns cool. You take a seat beside them quietly. You're just observing, just listening, and somewhere inside you, a strange thing happens. You stop thinking about Brian, because he's not the story anymore. Ethan is, not the way he died, but the way he lived. The notes he left for coworkers, the time he helped a stressed out mom install batteries into a talking raccoon toy right at the checkout counter, the break room pizza nights, the way he always called the vending machine the snack portal, the way he always said goodbye with, "You're doing great." Even if no one said it today, you realize that for all the spreadsheets and sales quotas and inventory scans, Ethan understood the assignment better than anyone. He made people feel seen. And if that's not magic, what is? Here's a fringe fact that probably won't show up on a motivational poster. There's a phenomenon called positive residue in workplace psychology. It refers to the lingering impact a kind leader has on a team even years after they're gone. Increased collaboration, less burnout, higher morale, even improved emotional vocabulary. Turns out, kindness doesn't just make people feel good, it rewires how they function. And Ethan, he left enough residue to fill a city block. At the vigil the town held for him the week after his death, over 300 people came. Some brought flowers, others brought old store receipts, with Ethan's initials circled next to some handwritten note. "Don't forget batteries. You're a good mom. Keep going." People don't save receipts unless they mean something. Back in the park, Lily curls up beside Valerie. Jake skips a rock so hard it practically cartwheels across the lake. You notice he's wearing Ethan's old hoodie again, the navy blue one with the faded college logo. It almost fits now. You think about the life Ethan was building, the birthday parties he still had planned, the employees he was mentoring, the joke he never got to tell because someone decided money mattered more than mercy. Historians still argue whether justice is meant to repair or just acknowledge, whether the closure we crave from courtrooms ever truly arrives, whether a sentence can ever balance the loss. Valerie doesn't debate it, she lives it every day, and somehow she keeps going. The town helps. Mia, the teenage employee who found Ethan, now works in early childhood education. Carlos runs a family toy and craft store, tiny but full of heart. And yes, the old Playworld team still meets for coffee every few months. They swap stories, roll their eyes at corporate emails from the past, laugh too loud, cry a little. They never call it a support group, but that's what it is. You get up from the park bench and walk toward the lake. The sun is lower now, gold streaks across the water. The wind is picking up just enough to carry voices, but not enough to carry away the warmth. And you think, maybe this is what memory is for, not to haunt, but to hold. You remember how Ethan used to start every Monday staff meeting with the same line? "This place can be chaos, but we can be calm." It was corny, but somehow it worked. Back at the lake, Valerie stands, brushes the sandwich crumbs off her jeans. She gathers the kids and their picnic bag. As they walk back toward the parking lot, Jake runs ahead and holds the car door open. "Thanks, bud," she says, patting his head. And you catch a glimpse of her smile. Not the full version, just a flicker, like a pilot light that never quite went out. You're walking through time now, not places, through the gentle erosion of memory, through what happens after the news cameras pack up, after the court transcripts are filed, after people stop whispering in grocery store aisles. This is the long after, the part of tragedy no one documents where grief becomes routine. and headlines become trivia. Playworld, as a company, is all but extinct. The name appears now and then in nostalgia threads online. Some Redditor posts a photo of an old receipt with rainbow lettering, captioned, "Anyone else remember this place? It smelled like melted rubber and freedom." Replies flood in. "Yes, my grandma bought me my first Game Boy there. Remember the indoor jungle gym? I got lost in one when I was 5. I still blame that place for my commitment issues." But no one talks about the murder. Not unless you scroll deep. Not unless you're looking for it. Eventually, someone links to an old news article about Maple Grove, and a few curious readers fall into the rabbit hole. They whisper, "Wow, and this is so sad," and then move on. Because that's what most people do. But you stay because you know that behind every "so sad" is a story still breathing. The Maple Grove building, formerly Playworld, briefly a furniture outlet. Briefly, nothing is now a climbing gym. The kind with padded floors and ropes and an aggressive soundtrack. Kids run through it now, screaming with joy. Some of them were born after Ethan died. They have no idea, but the janitor does. He was one of Ethan's floor team. His name's Greg. He took the cleaning job after the gym opened, just to keep the building cared for. He doesn't tell the new owners why, doesn't say a word about Ethan. But sometimes, when he locks up for the night, he stands in the corner of the gym, formerly aisle 12, and whispers, "You would have loved this." There's no reply. But the silence feels warmer. You move through town now like a ghost of your own. Everyone's older. Jake has a learner's permit. Lily wants to be a teacher. Valerie still doesn't date. Not seriously. She says she hasn't decided if that part of her heart is still available. And honestly, she's okay with that. Because she's busy. And because healing isn't about finding a replacement. It's about learning to live with the shape someone left behind. That's what Ethan is now. A shape in the air. A pattern of presence. An outline you learn to color around. There's a quote she wrote once, in a letter to a friend after the sentencing. It said, "Grief is a room I live in. Some days I open the windows, some days I don't, but I always leave the door unlocked." You carry that line with you for days. Meanwhile, Brian Maddox is still serving his time. Quiet, unremarkable. He keeps a low profile. He has no visitors now, not even from the family who once defended him. His name is no longer linked to security systems or employee reviews. It exists on prison rosters, on monthly hygiene checklists, and in the minds of 3 or 4 true crime bloggers who haven't let the story go. One of them even starts a podcast episode titled "The Smiling Manager." When retail goes murderous, it trends for a week, then fades. Just like Playworld itself, historians still argue whether our retail giants ever really cared about us, or if we just projected care onto them because childhood memories are sticky and selective. Some say the death of toy stores marks the death of wonder. Others say it's just market evolution. But you've walked the aisles. You know better. It wasn't the plastic toys or the flashing lights that made Playworld special. It was Ethan. The guy who stayed late to tape a broken box so a kid wouldn't notice. Who snuck coupons under people's receipts if he knew they were struggling. Who put others before profit and dignity, before protocol. He made it magic. And now that he's gone, the spell is broken. But that doesn't mean the story is. In Valerie's attic, there's a memory box. She opens it once a year, usually alone. Inside are birthday cards, a photo booth strip of Ethan in a ridiculous Viking helmet, and one of his old manager pins, gold-colored plastic, slightly bent. She turns it over in her hand, then closes the box gently. No dramatics, no tears, just reverence. Here's a historical footnote that feels oddly fitting. The last known FAO Schwartz employee in its original Fifth Avenue location reportedly kept a single toy soldier uniform in their closet for years. Just in case, they said. In case someone ever wanted to make magic again. Valerie, she doesn't believe in magic anymore. But she does believe in reminders. In the reading nook at the Maple Grove Library, there's a new edition. A little wooden box labeled, "Leave a note from Mr. Ethan." Kids write things like, "Thank you for liking Legos. You sound like a nice man. I hope heaven has toys." Every few months, Valerie stops by and reads them. Then she smiles and walks back out into the sun. You find yourself in a toy store but not Playworld. This one's smaller, independent, no flashy signage, No animatronic dragons or jingle jingles looping endlessly overhead. Just soft classical music playing from a dusty speaker and rows of wooden puzzles, handcrafted dolls, and board games with hand-lettered price tags. You pick up a wind-up tin robot, turn the key, watch it stagger forward on tiny legs. There's something quiet and dignified about it, like it knows it's from a different time and doesn't care who replaced it. The owner, a man named Curtis, greets you with a nod. He's in his 60s, wears a cardigan, and has the kind of voice that makes you think he was once a teacher, or a librarian, or maybe both. He knows what you're looking for before you ask, "Playworld." "Huh," he says. "That place used to be everything." You nod. He sighs. "They paved over it with something forgettable, didn't they?" You nod again. Then he says, "There used to be a magic to those big places. You know, right up until the day we realized magic could bleed." It hits you harder than expected, because there's truth in it. The murder of Ethan Cole wasn't just the tragedy of one man's life stolen. It was a collision between what we want to believe about joy and what's actually behind the curtain. Most people never think of toy stores as dangerous. Banks, sure. Nightclubs, airports, dark parking garages. But a place with balloons tied to shopping carts. A place that sells glitter slime and 10-in-1 race car kits. It shatters something primal. Brian Maddox didn't just commit a crime. He cracked the frame of the painting. He made us question the setting itself, and in doing so, he committed a different kind of violence. One against the illusion of safety. Historians still argue whether modern crimes inside happy spaces are more impactful because of the contrast, or because we never saw them coming. A mass shooting in a school, an assault in a church, a murder in a toy store. The spaces weren't sacred, they just felt that way. But they never were. You walk out of Curtis's store with a small brown bag. Inside is a tiny wooden puzzle shaped like a dinosaur. For the next kid who needs magic, Curtis says with a wink. You don't correct him, you just nod and leave. Because even small things can still hold weight. Back in Maple Grove, the climbing gym thrives. Kids race up colored holds like tiny superheroes. No one thinks about the floor beneath them. No one asks what used to be here. And maybe that's okay. Maybe innocence gets to move on. But every so often, someone will pause. A parent waiting near the lockers, a staffer closing up for the night. They'll feel something, a chill, a pang, a sense that the air has history, not haunted, just layered, and then they'll move on. Outside the gym, across the street, there's a mural painted on the brick wall of a coffee shop. It's relatively new, done by local artists. It features a cityscape made of toys blocks for buildings, doll houses for apartments, a skyline of crayons and yo-yos, and right in the middle, standing on a Lego rooftop, is a cartoon figure in a navy hoodie with a clipboard in hand. You know it's Ethan. There's no label, no signature, just a small phrase written near the bottom corner. You made it better, no context. But everyone seems to understand. Every once in a while, someone leaves a flower below the mural. Usually something simple, a daisy, a sunflower, blue ribbon tied around the stem. It's never announced. No social media post, no plaque, but people know. And that's the thing about grief that no one teaches you in school. It's not always loud. It's not always public. Sometimes, it's just a gesture repeated by someone who refuses to forget. You sit at a nearby bench and watch the cars go by. Life in motion. Someone honks. A dog barks. A group of kids walks past holding milkshakes and plastic swords from a birthday party loot bag. The world has kept spinning. But Ethan's part of it now. Not in headlines, not in breaking news. In the mural, in the hoodie, in the tiny notes kids still leave at the library, in the whistle of a balloon released toward the clouds. You remember one of Ethan's old sayings, a favorite among his staff? It was usually said after a long shift or when something went ridiculously wrong. Like when the fire alarm went off during a teddy bear demo day. He'd smile, raise an eyebrow, and say, "Well, no one died, so it's a win." The irony is cruel, but you still smile. Because he said it to comfort people, not to tempt fate. And because in the end, it wasn't about tragedy. It was about how many people he saved before it ever arrived. You're not sure when it happens, exactly, but at some point, the story stops being about a toy store and starts being about you, about what you carry, about what you remember. It begins quietly, like most shifts in perspective do. Maybe it's the sound of a walkie-talkie chirping in a documentary, or the glint of a forgotten action figure at a garage sale, or a passing phrase Ethan would have loved that uttered by someone you barely know. And suddenly, you're back in aisle 9, surrounded by plastic swords and helium balloons. But this time, there's no crime, no tape, no sirens, just the ordinary wonder of it. You remember the way the shelves used to tower over you as a kid? How everything felt larger than life? How the floor tiles squeaked under your sneakers? How you always swore you'd only be there 5 minutes but left an hour later with glitter on your face and joy in your hands? You didn't know it then, but people like Ethan made those memories possible. Not the executives, not the mascots, the people who held it together, stocked the shelves, picked up the pieces, said things like, "Hey, I've got you covered when your register tape ran out," or "Go take 5 when you were about to cry on shift." Ethan Cole was one of them. And that's the part people miss when they look at tragedies like his. They focus on the loss, but they forget the value. The value of being the kind of person who made people feel safe in the simplest way possible. Who made eye contact when they talked to you. Who left behind 1,000 invisible fingerprints. Not on glass, but on people. You imagine what his life would have been like had things gone differently. Maybe he would have finally taken that regional manager job. Maybe he'd have coached Jake's soccer team. Maybe he'd have written a book about leadership, with a terrible pun in the title like Toying with Success. Maybe, but even if none of that had happened, he still would have mattered, because what he did already mattered. The older you get, the more you realize how rare that is, to be quietly good, not flashy, not loud, just dependable. Someone who makes spaces better by being in them. Someone who says, "Let me help," before being asked. Someone who sees people not as problems to solve, but as humans to understand. Here's a fringe fact for your sleepy brain. Ancient Egyptians believed that the soul had 5 parts. One of them, Ren, was your true name. They believed that as long as your name was spoken, you never truly died. Ethan Cole. Ethan Cole. Ethan Cole. The man who wanted better inventory logs and remembered everyone's birthday. The man who labeled everything with a Sharpie and overused the phrase, "no worries." The man who didn't know he was walking into the last morning of his life but still clocked in with care. Back in the gym that took over his old store. The climbing walls now bear kid-friendly names like Sky Tower and Dragon Steps. But there's one route, simple, flat, beginner level, that a trainer casually refers to as the Cole Run. No one asks where the name came from, but it sticks. And you think, maybe that's how we survive. Not in plaques, but in phrases, in the way people talk, in the way they remember kindness without even realizing it, in the jokes passed down, the rules followed out of respect, the routines continued without explanation. In the mural, in the balloon, in the hoodie passed from sun to sun. You pause for a moment at the old parking lot, now repainted and repurposed. Where Ethan used to park under the lamppost, the bulb is still there, still flickers sometimes, still hums like it's holding a breath no one asked it to keep. You look up, and for the first time in a while, you don't feel haunted, you feel honored. Because you're not just remembering him, you're carrying him. And with every kind word you say to a coworker, every time you help someone for no reason, every small thing done right, without fanfare, he's still here. Still walking the floor, still fixing the shelf, still saying, "You're doing great," even if no one said it today. You return one final time, not to the store, not to the court, not even to the park, but to the quiet place inside you where the whole story lives now. It's not loud there. It doesn't need to be. Because by now, you've seen everything. You've stood behind Ethan's desk, walked through aisles that once rang with laughter, sat in the courtroom that couldn't hold all the pain. You've seen the ghost of trust, the echo of betrayal, and the slow, steady breath of recovery. And somehow, through it all, one thing remains: the simple weight of a life well lived. Not the headlines, not the sentence, not the headlines or the final frame of a true crime doc. Just Ethan, a man who woke up early, who made coffee for his crew, who remembered Mia's favorite candy bar and left it on her register with a sticky note that said, "Hang in there," who made the plastic world of a toy store feel like something sacred, because it wasn't it? For the kids, for the parents, for the tired employees in scuffed sneakers, it was sacred in that soft, unglamorous way good things often are. And Ethan, for all his ordinary habits and quiet strength, made sure it stayed that way until someone shattered it. Someone who confused silence for submission, kindness for weakness, a clipboard and a clear conscience for something disposable. But Ethan didn't go quietly. He left behind a ripple. You can see it now, in the people who speak more gently, in the employees who remember that name badge. Pride isn't about hierarchy, it's about care. In the mural, the balloons, the child's scrawl that reads, "Thank you for liking Legos." All of it, one long heartbeat that refuses to stop. Here's your last quirky detail. In parts of rural Japan, some shops ring a tiny bell when someone walks in, not for attention, but as a gentle ritual, a way to say, "You're here, and that matters." Ethan was a bell like that. People walked into his life and felt seen, welcomed, real, not because he had to, but because that's just who he was. Valerie still walks the lake path in spring. She still brings the balloons. Jake is taller now. Lily, bolder. And even though they don't speak about Ethan as often, he's there. In the cadence of their conversations, in the way Jake always opens the car door for his mom, in the way Lily signs every school project with a tiny drawn heart just like the ones Ethan doodled in lunch notes. People talk about legacy like it's something carved into buildings or engraved on metals. But Ethan's legacy, it's carried in memory. And memory, when kept with care, outlasts everything. Even buildings, even brands, even the worst of endings. You take a breath now. Let the silence stretch a little longer. Feel how full it is, how gently it holds you. Because this isn't a murder story anymore. It's a reminder to show up early, to make the coffee, to remember birthdays, to be the reason someone smiles today, and maybe to whisper a name every once in a while, not because it haunts you, but because it matters. So now, as we bring tonight's journey to a close, take a deeper breath. Let the rhythm slow. Let the muscles behind your eyes finally soften. Let your thoughts stretch out like they've been walking for miles. And now, they've found somewhere safe to rest. Picture the toy store again, but not the moment of loss. Picture the good days, the shelves fully stocked, the soft whir of overhead fans, that low buzz of childlike excitement. Picture Ethan by the front doors, holding a clipboard, flashing that relaxed grin that made even a stressful day feel manageable. Let that version stay with you. Let the weight of the darker moments drift further back, like fog pulling away from the lake, because you've faced them now. You've named them. You've walked through every aisle of this story, every dusty corner, and you've come out on the other side not unscathed, but aware, and sometimes that's the best we can hope for. So as your body sinks a little deeper into your bed and the hum of the room becomes part of the quiet, know this: not every good person gets a statue, but the best ones leave something better behind. A shift in how we treat each other, a softness in how we speak, a choice in each moment to be the kind of person who stays even when it's easier to look away. Ethan Cole stayed, and now you carry that story with you. And maybe, just maybe, it helps you sleep. Good night.